Welcome to Happy Crappy Paints, the 7th continent, player characters and fires. This is a speed paint, and this is the end result after we're done. I decided to paint all the miniatures in one sitting, so the technique I decided to use is a little bit different from the other videos I've done for Conan. For this I'm going to do wet blending and so on, so I'll show you that later. But for now, start with a white primer. And here you can, if you wish, pause the video and take a look at the colors that I've decided to use. But in essence, what I want to do to increase the speed is to put all the base colors that I intended to use on a wet palette from the beginning, together with a big droplet of water, so that I would thin the paints that I'm using at the time I'm using them with the tip of the brush as I'm painting. This to increase speed, but also to allow for on-the-spot shading and mixing, and also keeping the shades of paint on the palette through the whole painting session, so I don't have to go back and try to remix or redo the shades of colors again. This time the wet palette is simply a wet paper towel on a ceramic tile, so very easy to do by with the things you have at home. Started with the white on all the minis. Have like a factory setup where all the minis are mounted on my wash bottles with a little bit of blue tack, and doing all the white colors in one go. Also adding or doing them in multiple layers. As you will see on some of these minis, I did not do a good job, enough job with priming the minis. Some of the white spray paints created a little bit of droplets on the mini. That's because I did this outside in, I guess the weather was too cold. So if you have a garage or a shed where there's no wind and that you can control the temperature or humidity, that's the best for priming miniatures. Elysian Green for the bamboo, and again painting all of the bamboo for all of the minis at once. It's Ferdinand right there. It's hard to see what that bamboo stick is. I'm imagining it might actually be a bow. So Elliot Pendleton, he has a homemade bandage made of leaves on his arm, so I decided to paint that in Elysian Green as well. And of course H.P. Lovecraft is being grabbed by some type of aquatic creature from underground. All the wood on these miniatures I decided to paint using the same method as I've done for most of my Conan minis, which is a Ushabti Bone and a Seraphim Sepia wash on top of that. So Ushabti Bone is the next color down the line on the wet palette. Use that for all the wood. Also for Mary Kingsley's canoe. The music I chose for this video is all Kevin MacLeod, and it's from the Google library of music to use when you do YouTube videos. I can highly recommend perusing that library. It's easier to search and find music for your videos than, for example, Free Music Archive. And I picked the music to kind of go along with the theme of the 7th continent, being a little lonely and maybe depressing and dark and and so on to go along with the mysterious island you're exploring. Next color down is the skin tone, and for that I chose Kislev Flesh. You can use any skin tone. I decided to use a very light skin tone, using the same skin tone for all characters, even for Victor Frankenstein, which in all honesty you could use more of a bleak or blue or green skin tone for. But for ease and speed of painting these miniatures, I use the same skin tone for all of them, Kislev Flesh. These miniatures are small. It's kind of hard to see, I guess, here on this video, but they are quite a lot smaller than the normal 28mm miniatures I'm used to painting in Conan. So some of the details are hard to paint, but I decided not to worry since they are small and gonna look at these miniatures from a distance. I decided to not bother with too many of the details. For the hair color for all the minis, I decided to use a dark gray. As you can see on the palette, I am mixing the Abaddon Black that I have after the skin tone on the wet palette, and I'm picking some of that up with my brush and mixed it with the white on the wet palette. So all of my characters are getting black hair, except for Keelan McCluskey, who's of course a redhead. But other than that, all of the minis I painted with the same hair color, just for the purpose of speed. Remember, when painting black hair, don't use pure black, use a gray. And if you want to get some distinction and tone and depth to the hair, then use Nuln Oil, and then highlight it back up again with a lighter gray to bring texture to hair. Decided to use a smaller or finer brush to get the features of the face, the like eyebrows and the beard. Again, details on these minis, they're very small, so it takes some time to actually get this done right. For the dress, I used Zandri Dust for the lower part of Keelan's dress. Same Zandri Dust to the pants of Ferdinand. For the top part of Keelan's dress, I mixed Averland Sunset, which is a yellow, with the Zandri Dust. It's hard to see, but you can see that when I'm taking paint of the palette, that I'm mixing these two colors together to get a lighter version of the Zandri Dust. The proportion doesn't really matter as long as it's a little bit lighter and more yellow. For the sleeves of her dress and her hat, I used Emperor's Children, together with white to lighten it up a little bit. So again, this time I took light from the top of the wet palette down to where I had the Emperor's Children pink below and mixed it further down. You can see that on the palette there. Working with a palette like this is a lot faster method than mixing paints individually as you need them. For the book cover I used Caledon Sky, which is a matte dark blue. Using Caledon Sky again, lighten it up with some white. So here I've mixed the Caledon Sky with some of the white on the wet palette to make it a little bit lighter than the dark book cover. I'm painting it on. It looks kind of like a Superman suit at the moment, but it'll be looking better after we apply a blue wash. Using a shade of brown for the everything that's leather. For these minis I chose Skrag Brown, but you can use any reddish brown really. I used the same shade of brown for all of the minis, for everything that's leather. From now on you can see that I'm going to be adding colors one by one to the palette from the initial base colors that I've had added from the beginning. I'm going to try to let you know which of these are as we go along in this video, and I'm also adding them to the comments to the YouTube clip, a full list of all the colors used. It ended up actually being a lot of different shades. I will normally try to limit the number of colors used for these videos to demonstrate that you don't need a lot of colors when you're painting. In this respect I kind of failed for these videos, so you don't have to use the number of shades that or number of colors that I'm using, but continue to mix what you need on the palette instead. Keelan's bag is also Skrag Brown. There's a book sticking out of her bag that I didn't notice when I painted here. So it's not part of the video here, but I actually went back and added the same blue color to the book that's sticking out of her bag. H.P. Lovecraft, it's hard to see, but I imagine that he's clutching pages, loose pages, or a book. I decided that it's a book, so I painted it brown. If you want to make it look that he's clutching loose leaves from a book, you could use Ushabti Bone instead to make it look like a yellowed parchment that is clutching to his chest. Elliot, his bag also Skrag Brown. You might notice that I'm making mistakes as I go along here with Skrag Brown against the shirt, and this is now also a good time to mention the benefits of a wet palette, so you can just go back and use the white again to make corrections to mistakes you make. Elliot Pendleton seemed to be wearing some type of sandal, so I decided to use the Zandri Dust Averland Sunset mix for his shoes. Victor Frankenstein, for his coat I decided to use the dark blue grey color Dark Reaper as the base dark color there. So it's a little bit of a watered Dark Reaper, but I haven't mixed this with any other color. As you can see, I watered it a little bit too much, making me need to paint I think 3 layers of Dark Reaper in total, which is normally how you should be doing it, but in terms of speed paints I wanted to make it 2 layers, not 3. I used Dark Reaper and white to because I'd like the blue-gray tone for Mary Kingsley's dress. So I used Dark Reaper and grey to do that. H.P. Lovecraft's vest, I'm using the same color as Mary Kingsley's dress. On the picture it's more purple than grey. For Victor Frankenstein's pants, I'm using now a little lighter grey. I've added Fenrisian grey to the Dark Reaper and the white mix. And then going back, adding a second layer of Dark Reaper to the coat, or third layer in this instance maybe. For Ferdinand's vest, I'm using a different shade of brown than I used for the leather, so and I mixed that, and I cannot remember what it was, but it is a darker brown, maybe Runefang, together with Skrag Brown. But it doesn't really matter, but make it just a different enough shade from the color of brown you use on the leather, so that they don't look like it's the one thing on the minis. Ferdinand's shoes looks to be rags of a shirt or some white cloth, so I used the same just white scar white for the feet of Ferdinand. Going back, adding some detail to Ferdinand's head, adding the beard and the eyebrows. Adding more details to the face of Dimitri. For the bone that Victor Frankenstein is wearing, I'm using Ushabti Bone, like I've done for the other wood pieces of the minis. For Mary Kingsley's shoe, I'm using pure Abaddon Black, using pure Abaddon for Mr. Frankenstein's shoes as well. These I'm later going to use an art coat for, so they have a nice shine. H.P. Lovecraft also gets to be wearing black shoes. On the picture they look to be grey, but black was easier to do. It's on the palette and looks good enough. The pages of Keelan's book, I decided to start with to paint them white, pure white, and I'm going to add a wash to them later on, but for now they're pure white. I'm making some corrections to the book there as well. You can see the book pages. Fenrisian grey is the color I decided to use for H.P. Lovecraft's pants. It has a little bit of a blue tint in it, which matches well with his vest. To be honest, when I see it here now, I think that I actually did not use the same color for Mary Kingsley's dress as I did for H.P. Lovecraft's vest. I think I actually mixed in some more of the blue than what I had on Mary Kingsley's dress. For Keelan's hair, I just used a undiluted Red Dragon Bright. Making corrections with Kislev Flesh. Also making corrections to the dress. Leadbealcher, for the few items of metal that we have on these minis. First is the shovel blade that Elliot is carrying. Now we start with the flame, and as you can see here up on the wet palette, I have laid out from white to black 4 colors. First is White Scar, of course, then Red Dragon Bright, then more red, which is Evil Sun Scarlet, and to the left is Abaddon Black. And in between of these, I've mixed these 4 colors so that I get a shade from white to black through orange and red in the middle, as you can see there, that where I'm picking up paint. So this is where I'm wet blending the torch, starting with white closest to where the fire is starting, and then going out towards the edge of the flame, going then from right to left on the color palette, and painting while the paint is not dried yet. This is completely new. I never tried this before. It's something I picked up from other YouTubers. Worked quite well. First of all, it was fast and quick, of course, which is what I was going for here, because I wanted to play the game. So yeah, when you paint fire, you're going to do this again on the fire pits soon. Remember, white is closest to where the flame begins, and then almost black on the tips of the flame when you and that's it really. Painting the rocks using Celestra Grey, Fenrisian Grey, and probably some other dark grey. I forget which one I used to paint the stone. And I decided to use that same grey for the base of all of the stones on the fireplaces. So you can I added a little bit of Abaddon Black there to make it darker. So this is, if you haven't used this technique before, where you're mixing your own shades, this is a really good starting point to do that and experiment a little bit. Have everything on the palette. If you're missing a color, mix it instead of picking a new can. You learn a lot, and it's a lot of fun, and you can't really go wrong. Here we're using the same wet blending technique for the fireplaces, starting with not maybe a pure white, but almost a pure white at the bottom, and then working yourself upwards. Remember that you're supposed to paint over the previous layer with your next color, and then slightly brush through the layer underneath to make them look good and join together. So it's hard to see when I'm speeding up the movie due to the long length of it. So I could, I guess, slow this down a little bit. But in essence, what you're doing is painting, starting at the previous layer, and then pulling the brush downwards, so that you mix the paint you just painted with the paint you now have on the brush as you're doing this. A lot easier than I thought. Switching to more of a red, you can see I'm painting through the orange. Also dabbing a little bit of a more red to the tops of the flames. really good practice. If you haven't done this before, this is an excellent opportunity to practice painting flame. Don't be afraid to go very dark. Don't almost pure black at the tips of the fire. Using a brown, Skrag Brown or Runefang or some mix thereof or in between for the wood or the wood pieces at the bottom of the fireplaces. I'm not taking particular care here. As you can see, I paint some of the rocks actually. I'm hitting that with some of the brown. It's not going to matter too much because you're going to dry brush the rocks, so the edges of the stone is going to be turning white anyway. Starting with the washes, this is when, you know, where the magic happens. Starting with flesh shade. Use it a little bit. Use it sparingly, because we don't want to go back and do a lot of highlighting for speed reasons. So it's better to use a little bit of shade multiple times than just drench the whole thing in shade and having to go back and highlight the colors back up again. Gonna have to do that anyways for a lot of the areas. Drakenhof Nightshade for Victor Frankenstein's coat. Dirty Violet for Mary Kingsley's dress to make it purple like it is in the picture. Worked quite well actually. An experiment I tried, and it went well to make a dark bluish grey more purple. Using again the Drakenhof Nightshade, the blue wash for the pants, Elliot's pants. Also using Drakenhof Nightshade for H.P. Lovecraft's vest. Athonian Camo Shade. It's time to shade the bamboo. And also the octopus tentacle, or whatever it is, monster tentacle that comes up out of the ground. Agrex Earth Shade. Starting with Keelan's dress. And all the leather details on all of the minis. Also using Agrax on Ferdinand's vest and pants. and agrax on at the bottom of the fireplaces. Here you should use plenty of wash to fill in all the little nooks and crannies and gaps between the rocks and the wood. Nuln oil to shade all the white areas. Using Nuln oil on Dimitri highlights the difficulty of shading white, because you need to go back and repaint the white back on top of it again. If you've ever done stormtroopers for Imperial Assault, for example, this is a familiar step where you're painting it white using shade and then painting white back on top over it again. Probably a smarter way to do that, but that's how I've done it in the past, and it works well. Nuln oil also for the hair, like I talked about before, and his shoes, Elias' shoes, and also Ferdinand's rag shoes. Some Nuln oil on those. Decided to use Nuln oil on H.P. Lovecraft's pants. And of course the rocks, all of the rocks, on all of the fireplaces as well. As you get this goes quite fast. The shade, the Agrax Earth shade is not yet dried on the fireplaces. All in all, painting all of the 7th Continent minis took about 4 hours. The footage, the raw footage, is about 2 hours. Seraphim sepia for all the wood. And, of course, Keelan McCluskey's dress. Seraphim sepia add a nice yellow tone. Like as you can see here when I shade the book pages to make it look like parchment. Also using, like I said, on the wood, for starting with the canoe paddle. If you want the wood to be darker, you can use Agrax Earth Shade instead. Using Seraphim on the thigh bone as well. Fuegan Orange. Use that to go over all of the fire to make it a little bit red at the top, and the orange more orange, and blending a little bit of the fire. Highlighting Dimitri's white clothes back up again, so making the top parts of the thighs white, and his shoulders and top parts of his arms and so on. Don't be afraid to leave quite dark shadows underneath his thighs and arms. Using white scar to paint the collar of Mary Kingsley and the cuffs of her dress as well. Corrected that, some corrections with a blue, light blue, and that also highlights the dress at where all the top parts of the dress, and also where you can imagine that the light hits first, so the knee, the shoulders, top of their arms, and so on. Also a blue-gray on top of H.P. Lovecraft's shoulders, and then using Dark Reaper, maybe diluted with some Fenris and Grade, so to add it a little bit more lighter to on top of Victor Frankenstein's coat on the shoulders and his knee, and the top part of the creases of his coat. Highlighting Keelan McCluskey's dress back up again with Zandri Dust, and a mixture of Averland Sunset and Zandri Dust. I went a little too strong of highlighting the dress again, so I ended up being not too happy with it. So I decided to make her dress dirty by adding more brown and more Zandri Dust to it back up again. You'll see it soon at the bottom of her dress. Starting adding little specks of grey and so on to make it look like she's been walking through mud. That was basically me making corrections where I wasn't happy with the end result. Here you can see I'm adding grey into the bottom of the dress to make it look dirty. Also using wet blending again. So adding Abaddon Black and also the grey, and like Dark Reaper I used for Frankenstein's coat to the bottom of the dress. Then I'm adding some white in to make it like a little bit of a stains, like it's been Caribou Crimson to shade the pink blouse of Keelan McCluskey and also her pink hat. Moving on to dry brushing. Like I mentioned on most of my videos, you don't need to use Terminator Stone, you can just use Ushabti Bone when dry brushing. Using that for all of the stone areas and all of the fireplaces. It doesn't matter if you hit the wood a little bit with the dry brush. It looks natural as well. This is difficult not to hit the dress with the dry brush, or his pants, or the tentacle. Highlighting the tentacle with Elysian Green mixed with some white scar to make it a lighter shade of green at the top parts of the tentacle. Skrag Brown again mixed with some white to highlight the leather at the top parts of the bag, or the exposed parts of the bag. Here's where I noticed that the book was there. I didn't paint it until I was done though. Celestial Grey is for the bases. I decided to have light bases for these minis because the minis are so small. I didn't want to have black bases, but that's a matter of taste. I also decided not to add anything to the bases, like tufts of grass or sand or rocks, since they're so small. Also highlighting with, I think, Kislev Flesh and white the ends of the femur to make it look like more like a bone. So it's something you certainly can do. And then shading the or highlighting the flesh with Kislev and white, the top parts of their hands and the foreheads, nose, chins, and so on. Look what we are used to be doing on Conan or any other mini that you've been painting. And accentuating Mr. Pendleton's muscles as well. As you can see, I decided not to shade Pendleton's white tank top at all, or any of the shirts really, Ferdinand's or H.P. Lovecraft's. Runefang Steel to add some highlight to Elliot Pendleton's shovel, and also to all of the metallic belt. Not belt, the coat buttons and bag buttons and so on. Last thing, actually not the last thing, before you do this step you need to varnish your minis with a matte varnish, and when that's done and dry and you've protected the mini from wear and tear, then you add the art coat to bring some shine back to selected pieces. So bringing the shine back to Frankenstein's shoes, Mary Kingsley's shoes, and also the tentacle, to add some final finish. So this is the end result again. Thank you for watching this video, and next time I will probably be back doing Conan miniatures again. Thank you. Bye.